Arech ata ashera anat malacha haolam asher kedishanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lihitatif letzitzit. Good morning, Abby. Good morning, Troll Patrol. It's a good one. It's a good username. How are you all doing? Good morning, Dr. Punk. How are you this morning? Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm glad you feel safe here, Maddie. I'm really glad. You know, I don't always feel safe here, but I'm glad you do. But we're in different positions in the system. I imagine it's a very safe place for you. So this morning, we are going to say some old words in Hebrew. And then we'll read some even older words, translated though, into English. We'll read a story about the construction of Baal's temple. And then we'll say some words in Sanskrit. And then some more words in Hebrew. And then maybe we'll have breakfast. We'll see how we feel. Shema Yisrael Asher Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. Can I just say that I love that you all are saying hi to one another? It's really great. Yeah, it's little chirps, little chitter chatters. Hi, 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 hi. Hello, everyone. Hey, we're all here together. Isn't that nice? We're in this nice, safe space. It's good. Thank you. Ve'ahavta את ענת אלוהיך, ובכל לבבך, ובכל נפשך, ובכל מאודייך, וחיו הדברים האלה, אשר נוחי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך, בביתך, ולכתך, בדרך, ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך. Abby, I thought your kid was bigger than a baby. How old are they? Are they ill? I'm so sorry. I'm sure they'll be okay, but that sounds very stressful. More stressful than my day today. V'chaya, ki v'achaya Elohecha, el ha'arz asher nisbai lavatecha, Levram leizchachol Yaakov. Vatedlach avrin gedolot v'davot asher lo vanita. Uvatim mileim kol tuva asher lo binata. Uverot tatzuvim asher lo hasat v'agararim vizitim asher lo natata v'alachta v'shavata. Hishamir lecha ben tishchach et Yahweh asher tishacha mi'aretz Mitzrayim mi'bat avadim. At what point does one stop being a baby and start being a kid? I don't know. 3 is that liminal state. Well, I hope she gets better soon. No, it's not Arabic. It's a language that's very similar to Arabic, closely related. It's Hebrew. Hebrew. Listen, Israel, listen, you who struggles with God. Yahweh Eloheinu Asherah El Baal. They're all one. All one. Yeah, fevers can be super scary. And given that it is 2022, right? Given the nature of our world today, illness comes with an extra psychological load. Which I think is unfortunate, right? Like, nowadays, you can't just be sick. You can just be like, oh, I've got a fever. I'll get better soon. Or, oh, my kid has a fever. They'll get better soon, right? It comes with, risk of becoming a kind of social pariah, right? You must isolate. You must be responsible. Otherwise, you will be judged for the way that you treat illness. Ugh. Thanks, society. I mean, it makes sense, right? Keeps us safe, keeps us not from infecting one another, but it's just another symptom of illness that didn't exist before. Social unrest, social nervousness, fear of being judged for your infectiousness. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's not what you're going through at all. But we had a COVID scare at my house for the last 2 weeks. Everyone's been very... Don't breathe on me. It's challenging, you know? Illness is challenging today. This tallis. What did I tell you about this tallis? It was my grandfather's. So, we can read a story. This story. Story from ancient Canaan. About all of those different gods. Yeah, it was my grandfather's. You're not mistaken. I'm just wondering if I said anything else. Or what you mean by story. There's many stories associated with this little bit of cloth. It's an interesting garment. So this is a very old story. This story is around 3,600 years old. It was written down by a scribe in the court of the king of Ugarit. The scribe's name was Ilimiku. It's rather unusual that we know his name, but we know his name. So the scribe was named Ilimiku, and he wrote down this story that had been told generation after generation in his city. And it's a story of Baal. It's a story of El, a story of Asherah, a story of Anat, a story of a sea serpent, a story of Kothar Wahasis, right? All these names, all these characters, which today we call gods. And, right, there's a metaphysical lesson, right, that all these gods are one, but that metaphysical lesson came later, and in this story they are a multitude, and they don't like one another, right? You ever have that feeling? Like you're a single person, but inside the unity that is yourself, there are all these different parts, and they're fighting, and they disagree with one another. You want to do a thing, but you don't want to do a thing. You certainly don't want that other part of you that wants to do the thing, but it really wants to do the thing, right? Everybody wants control. All the different parts want their own perspectives and directions to be in the forefront. Yeah, right? So this is the same way, right? So we have this theological claim, Shema Yisrael Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Listen, you who struggles with God. The gods, they're struggling, right? But they're all one. So here we have this story of a mother and a father, El and Asherah, and their children, Baal and Anat, right? But they're not strictly their children. They come from various different god lineages. And Baal wants to be king. So Baal fights a serpent, and he wins, and he drinks the serpent. And then Baal says, I deserve a palace. But he can't just have the palace. He has to go to his father and say, hey, Dad, can I have a palace? And Dad's like, go give gifts to your mother. And he's like, okay, fine. I'll give Asherah some gifts. Anyway, then they hire a contractor, Kothar Wahasis, and they build a palace. And Kothar's like, you should put a hole in that palace. And he's like, nah. He invited his brothers into his house, his cousins within his palace. He invited Asherah's 70 sons. He gave the gods lambs. He gave the gods ewes. He gave the gods cows. He gave the gods seats. He gave the gods thrones. He gave the gods a jar of wine. He gave the goddess a cask of wine, until the gods had eaten and drunk their fill. He gave them sucklings to eat. With a sharp knife, carved the breast of the fatling. They drank wine from golden cups. I have built my house of silver. I have built my palace of gold. Baal prepared the house. Hadad made preparations within his palace. He slaughtered oxen. He killed sheep, bulls, fatling rams, yearling calves. He strangled lambs and kids. He invited his brothers into the house, his cousins within the palace. He invited Asherah's 70 sons. He gave the gods lambs. He gave the gods ewes. He gave the gods oxen, cows, seats, thrones, and jars of wine. He gave the goddess a cask of wine. Until the gods had eaten and drunk their fill, he gave them sucklings to eat. They're having a feast. With a sharp knife, he carved the breast of a fatling. They drank wine from goblets, blood of the vine from golden cups. Have you heard that one before? Blood of the vine from golden cups, right? This was written as far away from the myths of Jesus as the myths of Jesus are from us, right? 2,000-year gap between each of them, and yet still we are talking about blood of the vine from golden cups. Interesting. And then conquering, more conquering. Baal captured 60 cities, 77 towns. Baal sacked 80, Baal sacked 90. Then Baal returned to his house, and Baal the conqueror said, I will do it, Kothar, Sea's sons. Kothar, son of the assembly, let a window be opened in the house, a casement within the palace. Then a slit can be opened in the clouds, as Kothar Wahasis said. Kothar Wahasis laughed. He raised his voice and shouted, Baal the conqueror, didn't I tell you? You'll recall my words, Baal. He opened a window in the house, a casement within the palace. Then Baal opened a slit in the clouds. Baal sounded his holy voice. Baal thundered from his lips. The earth's high places shook. Baal's enemies fled to the woods. Hadad's haters took to the mountains. And Baal the conqueror said, Hadad's enemies, Why are you quaking? Why are you quaking, as sailors of the valiant one? Baal's eye guided his hand. He swung a cedar in his right hand. So Baal was enthroned in his house. No other king or non-king shall set power over the earth. I will send no tribute to El's son, Death, no homage to El's darling, the hero. Let Death cry to himself. Let the darling grumble in his heart, for I alone will rule over the gods. I alone will fatten gods and men. I alone will satisfy earth's masses. And there we will stop. What a place to stop. So, Baal builds his palace. He's a conqueror. He's the king. And once he's the king, he says, I can conquer death. I can conquer death because I am the Lord of all. I am the God of all. I can conquer death. But as we will see, he cannot conquer death. And the serpent of death will get him, and his sister will have to rescue him. It's an interesting story, right? God king who thinks he can conquer death. The earlier gods, they had more pride that was clearly pride. Right? Like, they made claims about kingship and totality that they could not keep, right? Like, demonstrably, the narrative is about them unable to maintain their claims of kinship because the king is always supplanted, right? And once you get into later mythology, once you get into Yahweh and Jesus, right, the king is not supplanted. There's never any... the son does not usurp anymore, right? And so their pride gets a little bit hidden, but they're still prideful. Right? They're still flawed like humans. Good morning, Jenny. How are you? Your name isn't Jenny, your name is Jen. I'm sorry. Sometimes the font is very tiny. It's hard for me to read people's full names, so I often mispronounce. Please forgive me. So, now we will, we'll say some more god names. We'll shift from, Western Asian god names to Central Asian god names. These god names are in Sanskrit. They are Indo-European. No, they're just Indian gods. I did. It's not painted Sharpie, but yes, it's the tree of life, right? So, what we find when we look at these old stories, right, is that despite their incredible diversity, there are common motifs and patterns. In the same way that your hand looks a little bit like a chimpanzee's hand, and that hand looks a little bit like a mouse hand, and that hand looks a little bit like an iguana's hand, right? All of the hands, they have a root in a common origin, right? So we can read these old stories about these old gods, and we can read newer stories about newer gods, and we can recognize that all of their many shapes and forms can be arranged in a pattern. And if you try to arrange them in a pattern, you see that the shape of the pattern is like this, right? This is the tree of life. This is the shape that life takes as it replicates itself and changes through that process of replication. So we're going to say Arati, which means flame in Sanskrit. And in this prayer, Arati is the names of many gods. Kimmy, thank you for the suggestion that I post actual text of these things. So if you want to read the text, you can check the live stream channel in the Discord server. One of the pins is to Arati, and you can read a translation, right? So there's a story behind literally every name that I'm about to recite, a story that is as complex and old, maybe not quite as old as this story about Baal, but nearly, for every single one of these gods. But in a certain sense, none of those stories really matter, because they're part of a bigger story, which is this tree. Jaya Jaya Ratiya Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jaya Jaya Ratiya Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jaya Jaya Ratiya Venugopala Venugopala Venuola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jaya Jaya Rati Venkantaramana Venkantaramana Sankatarana Sitaramma Radheshama Jaya Jaya Rati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Sankara Samba Sadashiva Maheshwara Jaya Jaya Rati Raja Rajeshwari Raja Rajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati Mahakali and Mahashakti Jaya Jaya Rati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumanta Jaya Jaya Rati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimurtiavatara Jaya Jaya Rati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Rati Sanistaraya Sanistaraya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Rati Sankaracharya Sankaracharya Advaita Guravi Jaya Jaya Rati Sadgurunata Sadgurunata Shivananda Jaya Jaya Rati Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Jaya Jaya Rati Agastya Munaye Agastya Munaye Shirama Priyaye Jaya Jaya Rati Ayapa Samine Ayapa Samine Dharma Shastave Jaya Jaya Rati Jesus Gurave Moses Gurave Buddha Gurave Jaya Jaya Rati Muhammad Gurave Guru Nanak Gurave Samastya Guru Bodhamaha Jaya Jaya Rati Venugopala Natatra Suyabati Natandrakaratam Nema Vidyobati Kutoya Magni Twamiva Vantamanabanti Sarvam Tasya Basya Samitam Vivanti Om Gange Kayamune Kaiva Govari Saraswati Narmade Siddhi Kaveri Hiyaha Namastitam Namo Namaha Twameva Mata Chapita Twameva Twameva Bandhashasaka Twameva Twameva Vidya Ravinam Twameva Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Kayena Vacha Manasendriyarva Buddhyatmanava Prakrite Sabhavat Karomyadyad Mangalam Parasmahe Narayana Iti Sarmar Payami Sarva Dharmam Pravichaya Mamakam Saranam Vraja Aham Sva Sarva Papayo Mokshayami Masucha. Whatever actions I perform with my body, speech, mind, senses, my nature, my intellect, or my emotions, all these, I dedicate to you. Thank you. So, now, with that, we will say Kaddish. Kaddish is a prayer of mourning. The word Kaddish means holy in Hebrew, or rather Kadosh means holy in Hebrew. Kaddish, as it's pronounced that way, usually is implied to mean prayer, basically. Right? We say Kaddish over the bread and the wine. Blood of the vine and the golden cups. So we will say Mourner's Kaddish. It's a prayer of grief that reminds us of the suffering of every living creature on this here tree. And all of the gods who were conceived of and then supplanted by all the mythologers of the world for 10,000 years. You know, those gods suffer too. Gods died too. And then they get reborn. That's their story. So we can grieve those in our life who are gone, the things in our life that we lack. If there's anything that you are grieving, anyone that you are mourning, feel free to put their name in the chat. Or don't. For the last 2,500 years, my ancestors have been saying these words in response to death. Yidgadal v'yidgadash shemei rabba. B'yama divrachyote v'yamlich malchute b'chayachon v'yamachon v'chayedikol beit Yisrael b'gala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mivarach Li'olam Amei Almaya Yitbarach Vishtabach Vitbar Vitraman Vitnase Vitadar Vitale Vitallah Shemei Dekude Shabarichu Le'elam Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata Tush Bechata V'Nechemata Demiran Biama Vimru Amin Yehi Shlamar Rabba Amin Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Achol Yisrael Vimru Amin Ose Shalom Vimrama Hu Ya'ase Shalom Aleinu V'Achol Yisrael Vimru Amen. Oh, say shalom bimramav, oh, say shalom aleinu, v'alechol Yisrael, v'imru, v'imru, amen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be back here tomorrow to say these words again. Do I want to do a farm tour today? Oh gosh, Kate. You have been asking me for a farm tour for months, years, a year. I think you've been asking me for a farm tour for over a year. And every time I say no. So, I'm a room human. Today I'm photographing a bunch of thumbnails for the documentary that I'm working on. There was a time, around this time last year when I was streaming, where it made sense for me to get up and get out of the house and walk around my farm and give a tour. Everything is lush and green here now. Yeah, I was looking out the window just this morning and be like, oh wow, there's finally leaves. Sometimes they surprise me. Even I look out this window every morning, still, like, you know, the leaves come fast. And it's really, like, actually just today that my awareness of the hillside was like, oh, right, that is a believed forest. So, Kate, the reason why I've been reluctant to give a farm tour, one is that, like, my work is right here, and I say the prayers in large part as a kind of rhythm. So I'm gonna get started with my day now, and that means doing digital photography rather than walking around my garden. Which is unfortunate, right? Like, I wish that I could spend all day outside. And as the summer comes on and I'm spending more time outside and I have students, it'll be my job to go outside. I promise you, I will give a farm tour. It's difficult because, like, I want it to be compelling content, right? And it's like there's 10 people in the stream and my Wi-Fi connection is shaky. Like, I don't actually know how far my Wi-Fi goes, right? So I don't want to just, like, walk around and point a camera at stuff. Like, I don't think that would really be very entertaining for you or for me. Like, I want to actually show you the landscape that I live in a beautiful way, right? Like, in a compelling way. I want to really think about each shot and put them together. And I want to be careful. Which is funny for being a TikTok content creator, right? Because TikTok, the motivations around this platform are like, make it cheap, make it dirty, right? Like, just point your camera at it and fart, and everyone will think you're pretty. Yeah, I don't know. So it's challenging for me to know, like, what kind of content to make, like, what is the best way to tell these stories, best way that's satisfying to me, that's satisfying to you, that's satisfying to the algorithm. It's challenging, and I don't actually have the answer. Which I know is a very long-winded answer to, hey, will you show me your farm today? But, like, you've asked me so many times, and I do have a little twinge of regret for not being in a rhythm where I can do that. But I will make good farm content. How about that? That's the promise. I will make compelling videos about my farm for you, which will give you a more vivid sense of what it is like than if I were to simply walk around. Your favorite vid was the geese video. Okay, that's good to know. I'm glad you liked that film. That was a fun one to make. Yeah, there will be more goat videos. Alright, well, I'm gonna get on with my day. But it was lovely to spend this time with you. And I'll see you here tomorrow to say these words again. Farewell.